So far, we spent a lot of time talking about the theoretical risks of subscription models. The what ifs. But today, we're moving past all that. We're going to look at what actually happens when those risks become a reality. These are the real world consequences.
All right, before we dive in, just a quick heads up. This is part 7 of a 10-part series, and it's all based on a pretty deep research report called Virtualization Subscriptions, Hostage or Autonomy in Data Centers by Virtualization Options LLC. Now, naturally, in this explainer, we're only scratching the surface of the full report. Also, this is not legal advice, and it doesn't come with any kind of warranty. Okay, let's get to it.
So let's start with a really simple but kind of unsettling question. Imagine you walk into work one morning and your vendor, the company you pay for your core infrastructure, suddenly has the power to just freeze your entire operation. What does that actually look like? Well, we don't have to imagine anymore. The case studies are in.
Yeah, this is where we really make the jump from theory to reality. We're going to be looking at real-world stories from the report where these subscription dependencies caused some major, tangible disruptions for actual businesses.
The first major theme that pops up is what the report calls the operational freeze. And it's exactly what it sounds like. Situations where a pretty simple subscription issue can bring core business functions to a grinding halt.
Our first story is about a mid-sized healthcare provider. And, we're talking about an industry where uptime isn't just about making money, it can be about patient care. It can be about meeting strict regulations. The stakes are incredibly high. And this is what happened. A simple billing system failure meant a subscription payment got declined. The result? Access denied. Now, this wasn't just some small inconvenience. It completely froze their planned expansion of a critical electronic health record system. Just stopped.
What's really staggering here is just how fast a tiny error escalated. It starts with that billing issue. 72 hours later, their management console is revoked. That immediately halts a critical project, one with a regulatory deadline breathing down their neck. To get back online, they had to make an emergency payment at a premium rate and were forced to accept worse renewal terms. But it's not always a billing mistake that triggers the freeze. This next story looks at an educational institution where a simple administrative delay, just procurement paperwork, led to a really serious outage. So check out this chain of events. Their subscription renewal gets held up in procurement for just 3 weeks. During that little gap, the vendor automatically disables key features like automated failover. And of course, wouldn't you know it, a hardware failure happens right then. Because the system couldn't automatically move workloads, the outage was way worse than it should have been, and it hit them right during a critical student registration period. Okay, so beyond just freezing operations, the next huge consequence we're seeing is the financial squeeze. This is where companies get forced into these sudden, massive, and pretty much unavoidable costs. Take this manufacturing firm. They'd standardized their entire production infrastructure on one virtualization platform. They had good terms, everything was running smoothly. But then, their vendor got bought out by a much larger competitor. At their very next renewal, the firm was hit with a 40% price increase. Just like that. No negotiation, no options. The cost of migrating was just too high, so they had to swallow it. And it's not just about renewal price hikes. The financial squeeze can also look like this. A regional financial firm finds a critical security vulnerability. They need a patch, and they need it now to protect their data. The vendor tells them the patch is only available in a major new upgrade, one they weren't ready for. To get that patch for their current version, they'd have to pay for emergency support. And the cost? 3 times. That's right, 3 times the cost of their entire annual subscription just for a single critical security fix. I mean, it's a perfect example of the kind of leverage a vendor has when you're in a real crisis. And then finally, there's what the report calls the hidden toll. These are the consequences that don't always show up on an invoice, but man, they can be just as damaging, if not more so. So this retail company was facing a forced migration to a new platform version. The obvious cost, right, was the new subscription fees, but the hidden cost was so much bigger. Their IT team was completely tied up with this migration right before the holiday season. That meant critical e-commerce projects got delayed and they lost revenue. That's a huge opportunity cost.
And what about your reputation? A professional services firm had an outage during a messy subscription renewal dispute, and as this quote from the report makes clear, their clients didn't know or care about the vendor problem. They just saw it as the firm's failure. That damaged trust and led to them losing clients. That kind of damage can take years to fix.
So when you look at all these stories together, the operational freeze, the financial squeeze, the hidden toll, one single powerful theme emerges that ties every single one of them together. The report states it just perfectly. The common thread across these scenarios is a loss of control. In every single case, the organization lost the power to make the best decision for its own business. Ultimately, their choices were being dictated by vendor policies, by vendor timelines, and by vendor pricing, not by their own strategic needs or their operational reality. They simply weren't in the driver's seat of their own infrastructure anymore. And that leaves us with this final, really critical question to think about. These real-world examples show that when your vendor holds the keys to your data center, you absolutely have to ask yourself, who is really in control?